Hey, everybody, David Neagle here with the Successful Mind podcast. Today, my guest is Brian Proctor. He is the son of Bob Proctor, who was my mentor, and he has a new book out called My Father Knew the Secret, which is, I've read this 3 times now on audio, but it is phenomenal. I love the pictures. I love the pictures of the Maplewood Lane house in there. That's really like, this was such an experience for me to go through this. And it was emotional because there were so many stories that I knew from your dad, and to hear them from your perspective and what that meant to you, it was like going back in time. It really was. It was absolutely fantastic. There's not a day in my life that I don't think of your dad.
Yeah.
He meant that much to me. I mean, Brian, I would not be the person I am today or in the place I am if it wasn't for him. He was like an angel from heaven that just totally changed my life.
He was certainly a very special man, David. That's there's no doubt about that. Yeah.
So, okay. Why did you write the book? So in the book, I heard you talk about, you started this when he was still alive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started writing this book, David, probably 4.5 years ago. I was talking to my wife, Collier, about this, and I said to her, I said, Dad always says everybody has a book in them. And, I felt I did. I thought there was something I could put in it. And we were having a kind of a conversation around it. And I said, I'm not quite sure what my book has, And she kind of looked at me almost like I had two heads. And she said, Brian, she says, what is that one question you get asked at every seminar, every event, we have thousands of events that have happened. And it's always the same question. What's it like, being Bob Proctor's son? What's it like having Bob Proctor as a father? And it was just like that light went off. I thought, wow, that's perfect. I can actually share insights and stories of who Bob Proctor was, not necessarily as the man on stage, but as a father, and how he was at home as well, and how I was raised, and different stories and lessons that he taught me, his son. And so, there's going to be some good stuff there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started to write it, and I let Dad know I was writing it, and we had a lot of fun around it. We're both morning people. So gosh, David, there was many times at 5 o'clock in the morning, the two of us are on the phone and we're laughing and chuckling and talking about some of the old stories and some of the different things that have happened, and each of our perspective on that particular event. And it was honestly, it was a real joy writing it. I certainly never thought he wouldn't be here when the book came out. I was maybe not even quite halfway through with it when he passed, and it took me a number of months before I could even start writing again. It was just a tough time. And obviously you've read the book, so the first chapter, that's the first thing I wrote after Dad passed away. And
Oh, really?
yeah, that brought some tears just writing that. But I thought it was really important to have all of that there. Anyways, that's kind of how it started.
What was his? I see this picture of him on this chopper here. That's fun. He was such a fun guy. Like, when I was reading it, I was thinking to myself about things that people probably don't know. I remember in 2001, around when we went to the gala with Mercy Corps with 3% Club after the towers went down, and he had a black tie event, and him and Linda were dancing, and I was like, oh my God, this guy can dance.
He can dance. Yeah. Yeah.
Dance. I mean, like, it was one surprise after another with him,
Yeah.
What was his thought about the book? What did he think about you writing it?
He loved it.
Did you know the story you wanted to tell when you started, or did that unfold as you went through it?
It unfolded as I went through it.
Okay.
So nothing was set. A lot of it really came after he passed. But there was no flow at the time. I was just writing, and he loved the idea. Unfortunately, I never had the title of the book. We had been talking about different things, and I kept telling him a title I had in my head, and And I said, it just doesn't feel right. And he says, well, then don't use it. He says, don't rush these things. It'll come when it's supposed to come. And, I wished he was around for when the book came out, and I wished he knew the title, because the title, just feels really good. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing, David, I think, in whatever we believe, I think my father had a play in the title, because it came about several months after he passed, and I was having a vivid dream of Dad. Like, it was one of those really vivid ones. And I woke up, it was 3 a.m., and I had that title in my head, My Father Knew the Secret. And it was just like clear as, and it was, David, when that was
Yeah.
it. Just, I knew that was the title. The secret, when that movie came out and the book came out, that propelled my father to a completely, a whole other level.
Dude. Yeah.
We got him on Larry King Live, Ellen DeGeneres, all over the place. And I thought, boy, my father really did know the secret. And that from that moment on, that was the title. It just, it felt right.
Yeah. When The Secret happened, that I remember when it was obvious it was as big as it was. I remember him sharing the goal that he wrote on Maplewood Lane about having a worldwide organization. And I was like, there it is. Like, there it is. The one thing he knew, that there was something that was going to show up that would give him bigger exposure, help more people. And the patience that he had in what he did, what I also found was astounding. Like you say, he said not to rush the title, or those types of things, but he was a very patient man.
Well, here's the interesting thing, David. I think that anybody that's watching or listening to this should really take note of, and that is, you need to have persistence in whatever you're chasing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, my father, I mean, let's face it, he was one of the founders of the personal development movement. He really was.
Yes.
And he was one of the largest in the field. But here's the interesting thing. He was 72 years old when that movie came out. He had been working in that industry for 40 some years. And he was 72 when he was propelled to that that larger audience, per se.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about persistence. I mean, gosh, you know better than anybody. You've been around for a long time. You saw my dad in some of the earlier years, and what was required back in the early days to even be remotely successful.
Yes.
So it really was something that propelled him somewhere else. But he was a testament to what persistence was all about. But more than that, he had that knowing. It's like you say, he had that inner knowing that something was going to happen that was going to make this message get out to a broader market.
Yeah. It's interesting you say, I mean, it was like, the personal development movement was like in the dark ages when your dad started, right? I
Yeah.
have a hallway in my office building, and there's a picture of Andrew Carnegie, and then there's a picture of Napoleon Hill, and then there's a picture of Earl Nightingale,
Mhm.
um, and his partner, and then Lloyd Conant, and then there is a picture of your dad with Earl and Leland Van Vanderwall.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's a picture of your dad, and then there's a picture of me, and then there's a mirror.
Oh,
So
I like that.
whoever looks at it, it's like, here's your genealogy. Your dad used to do this thing with me. He would bring me pictures of people. Like, he brought me a picture one time. We were doing an event, and he lays this picture in front of me, and I go, "Who's that?" He says, "That's your grandfather." And it was the guy from Holiday Magic. What was that guy's name? William Penpatrick.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
William Penpatrick. He lays this. I had never heard of the guy before. I didn't know. He goes, "This is your grandfather," and I'm like, "Who's that?" He goes, "He was one of my mentors."
Mhm.
But he would do things like that. The way that he would lay the lineage out of what he did. But I cannot fathom how he, in the 60s and the 70s, I mean, you talk about his struggle in the book. Maybe speak about that a little bit, because I can't imagine what it was like. I know what it was like when I started, right?
Right. Yeah.
I can't imagine how he got people in a room back then.
Well, it's kind of interesting. You talk about that the lineage, and I was really lucky. I got to be around for all of that. Earl Nightingale, Lloyd Conant. I mean, gosh, Lloyd Conant to me was like a grandfather.
Really?
Yeah, which was really, really cool. And he was a very big mentor for my father. For those of you that don't know, Lloyd Conant was really the marketing man behind Nightingale Conant. He was the one who really got the message out there. Obviously, it was Earl's voice, but Lloyd was the one that had the real marketing chops. But I can remember stories dad talking about, and I as a young boy, I remember going on the road with him. In the summertime when I was off of school, I'd go on the road with him, and we'd be all over the place, and he'd drive for hours upon hours from town to town and put on a seminar for 40, 50 people. One time when he was first getting started, and this is actually in the book. David Nightingale, Earl's son, he and my father they thought they're going to put on a live event. And they rented a big auditorium. I think it had about 2,000 seats. And, this is long before the internet. So they
Sure.
created a really nice flyer, and they paid to have that flyer delivered to 20,000 homes and businesses in the local area. And he thought, that's going to fill the place. And so they were ready there, the night they're in the auditorium. Dad's standing behind the curtain. He keeps saying, David, how many people are here? How many people are here? They hired ushers to bring people in. I mean, he really thought this was going to be a big deal. David, 6 people showed up. So you can
Yeah.
imagine an auditorium with 2,000 people, and 6 people are there, and they're not all sitting together. They're scattered. I mean, that would have been a terrible experience. Um,
Uh-huh.
Here's the interesting thing, and this speaks to my father, I think for sure, is he got up and he taught as if the place was full. And that was it. He just knew what he had value, and he was going to teach whoever showed up. And he was always that way. And, fortunately, he got to fill auditoriums like that. He actually got to speak in a few stadiums with 20,000 people.
Yeah.
So it did happen. But that was, the early days. It was some tough slugging for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember back in the Neagle days, because I got introduced to your dad in 96.
Mhm.
And a guy gave me 2 cassette tapes because I had just started, well, I had been listening to self-improvement stuff for about 3 years. I was going to some of Tony Robbins stuff back then.
Mhm.
And a guy that worked with me, I worked for a petroleum company. He goes, "You're into this self-improvement stuff." He goes, "You ever heard of this guy?" And I said, "Who is it?" He said, "Bob Proctor." I said, "I've never heard of him." And he gave me 2 cassette tapes. They said Bob Proctor live in Orlando. And it was from one of the first speaking things that he did for Team Diamond
Mhm.
with Neagle.
Yeah.
And I left work that day, and I put those tapes in. I put the first tape in. And by the time the first one was done, I was in tears on the side of the road, because for 3 years I was studying and nothing made sense to me. Like, I was gathering all this information, but it didn't make sense. I didn't know what to do with it. It just didn't seem to fit.
Mhm.
And when he started talking about spirit, I knew he was the guy that I wanted to learn from. And I set a goal that day, like, this is the guy that's going to be my mentor. I don't know how that's going to happen, but it was. And I have an old recording of him. And now, it wasn't those tapes since have disappeared, the Orlando ones, but I have one that was from a couple of it was a couple Team Diamond events after that. And it was almost the exact same message that he
Mhm.
had. And I will frequently listen to those before I go on stage to speak someplace. It's like it has a magic quality to it.
Yeah.
Just to hear him teach, I could sit and listen to him teach for a week.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fantastic. So then it had to be very interesting, because after that he moved south, and then he moved back up to Toronto
Right.
with you kids, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't, I'd see, I wasn't 100% sure I knew this. But he didn't travel much then. He was doing business just in that area of Canada, right?
Yeah. So gosh, it was, I don't need to put dates to it. I can tell I was 18 years old.
Okay.
So I was 18. My sister was 16 and my brother was 14. My parents had separated when I was 14. And so we were living with my mother. And my mother had met a man, Randy, who she's married to. She's been married to him now for 40 some years. Well, when Mom and Randy were getting married, um, Dad had the opportunity to come up to Toronto, and he would be the one that would take care of us until we're all off and on our own. And he
Yeah.
jumped at the opportunity. He thought that, that this would be a great thing to have the kids at home. And so he moved up to Toronto. He was just dating Linda at the time, and they moved up to Toronto, and they rented a house at first, and were just there to take care of us. Well, Dad did not want to travel the way he was traveling. He didn't, for two things. He didn't want to leave us just with Linda, and he
Uh-huh.
wanted to be at home to be with us. And so that was more important to him than traveling all over the place. And so we had some incredible years while we were all still at home with Dad. Um, and I got to say, it was a testament to Linda, because here was Linda. She was younger. Linda was only 27 years old. Can you imagine at 27 coming in and having an 18, 16, and 14-year-old? This was like,
Right.
but Linda treated us like we were her own kids. And Dad and Linda had a great relationship, and it was a great experience. I thank my mother every day that she gave us that opportunity, because it really allowed us to get even closer to Dad. And yes, for the first number of years while we were home, he did everything he could to keep his business in the Toronto area, which was tough. I mean, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
But he did that so that he could be home with us, and that was pretty special.
Yeah. And the thing is that he had just an absolutely wonderful reputation. Like the amount of people that he could call on for
Right.
something was astounding. He always knew somebody somewhere. It was,
Yeah,
you know, and
always. I remember. I can tell you a funny story, David. When I was 15, we took a trip across the country, and he had just gotten a 1976 Cadillac Eldorado convertible. Great car. That's the car I learned to drive in. And we
yeah,
drove from Toronto to California. And when we were in California, Dad was getting us into all kinds of shows. And one of the shows he wanted to get us into was The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And he got tickets for us. We went there. We went to go in, and we couldn't get in because myself, my brother, and my sister were all under 18. You had to be 18 or over at that time to be in the studio audience. And here's a testament to my father. He always figured there's a way for everything to work out. And going back to what you say, he never burned bridges. He had connections all over the place. He started making phone calls, and he found somebody that knew a way around it. And he says, well, yeah, you can't be in the studio audience, but you can be sitting backstage. And he had some connections, and I don't know how it worked, but anyways, we went back probably 30 minutes later, and we were escorted backstage. We got to watch the Johnny Carson show from backstage. Johnny wasn't
wow.
there, but Flip Wilson, if you remember Flip Wilson, he was the
Oh,
host
yeah.
that evening. And so we got to meet Flip Wilson and Ed McMahon, and it was just, it was quite an experience. And that goes to two things. Dad never gave up when he was turned away, and he had connections all over the place. He really felt that building relationships and keeping them good, don't burn your bridges, was really an important thing, because you never know when somebody else could help you that from your past. And I got to congratulate you, David. It got, we were saying before we started here that it's been over 20 years
Yeah.
probably since we've seen each other. And watching what you've done, I think has been incredible, because I knew you studied with my father. And my wife has a really good friend. Probably 6 months ago, she was talking to my wife, and she was saying, yeah, I'm in this course right now with a fellow by the name of David Neagle. And I was like, wow, really, David? And I started looking things up, and she had such high things to speak of you. And this lady she's a very high executive in British Petroleum. So she's no lightweight. And she was really impressed with what you're doing. And she was also really impressed that you referred to my father a lot.
Yeah.
You didn't let go of where you learned certain things. So that's I got to congratulate you on that.
No, well, thank you very much. And it is it's like a labor of love in a way to refer to him, because I'm so touched by the things that he taught me. And like I said, there's not a day goes by, and especially when I'm teaching and working with other people, whenever I think about something that he told me, especially if it made an enormous difference in my life, which was most everything that he told me at the time, I always tell him that, that this is what Proctor taught me. And he was, Bob was the first person that believed in me. I'll never forget when I first started coaching with him, he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want to make $1 million." And now that wasn't 100% true at the time, but I was kind of coming from that place where you think money is going to solve every problem type of a thing.
Yeah.
And he goes, "You don't believe that you can do it though, do you?" And I kind of looked down, like I felt like ashamed, like how does he know what I believe, right? And I said, "No, I don't think I said, "But you asked me what I want, I'm telling you." He said, "Would you believe in my belief that you could do it?" And I was like, why would he say that to me? Like, what's in this for him to I mean, I was still in that stage where you get these conflicting beliefs in your mind from things that you hear in the past, and there must be some kind of hook to this, but there was never a hook. Like, he was really moving me along in a phenomenal direction, and always trying to cause me to grow to the next level. He would not let me off the hook for anything, nothing. There was, and sometimes, Brian, I swear, I thought he was kidding with me. So I'll tell you a story.
You should try being his son.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. We were in Sanibel Island, and I was working with some of the facilitators down there, and he said to me, "What time are you leaving in the morning?" And I was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something. He says, "We'll share a car." And I said, "Okay, great." So I get in the car. Now, the night before, when I went back up to the room, my wife had called me and she said, "Chicago O'Hare's going to be shut down. There's a major snowstorm coming through. Like, they're not letting anything in. I doubt you're going to get in." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll see." So I got in the car and he goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going back home to Chicago." And he was going to Pittsburgh. And I said, "But I don't know if I'm going to get there because there's this major storm." And he got really quiet. And he looked me right in the eye and he goes, "When are you going to start practicing what we preach?" And I go, "Bob, it's weather." And he goes, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Well, we can't affect the weather." He said, "You just don't have any belief, do you?" And I thought he was joking, but I went, so we go to the airport, we fly out of Fort Myers. There was nothing shut down, but I had to switch planes in Atlanta. I get to Atlanta and they're shutting everything down in the Midwest. And I tried several different things to get home because I really wanted to take that experience with him that weekend. It was an upper level experience and I wanted to take it home with me. It meant a lot to me. I didn't want to stay in a nasty hotel in the middle of Atlanta, which is where they were going to put me up. So I tried to rent a car. All the cars were rented. I tried to find a different way to get out of there. There was no way. So I hear him in my head is telling me there's always a way. Like, you better believe it. So I went back up to the ticket agent and I said, "Do you have any flights at all going back to Chicago?" She's like, "I'm telling you, there's nothing. Everything is shut down. There's no way you're going to get there." And I said, but she didn't look at her computer. And I said to her, "Would you at least look? Would you see if there's anything that hasn't been canceled?" So she looks and she says, "Well, there's one flight tonight at 9:15. She goes, "But it's going to get canceled." And I said, "Are there any seats on it?" She says, "There's one seat." I said, "Put me in that seat." And she tries like crazy to talk me out of it. "You're going to be canceled. I've already booked you for Wednesday. This was like a Monday. You'll fly back Wednesday." I said, "Put me in that seat." And then I walked around for 12 hours in Atlanta airport, just focusing on what I wanted. And we were the only plane that got into Chicago that day, the only one that they let fly. When we were getting on the plane, the pilots go, "I can't believe they're letting us fly. Like, they've got to cancel it." Of course they'll cancel it. We'll get everybody on board and they'll say, "Take them off. We're canceling the flight." But we went through and we landed in Chicago. And I was like, even the weather, even the weather.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny.
When you were, I mean, when you were like, say when you were like a teenager, did he help you get through the rough parts of being a kid? Did you listen to him then, or were you like how
You know,
were you with him at that point?
I've I've had several people ask me that kind of a question, and he was a great father through teenage years. Teenage years, let's face it, you kind of push boundaries a little bit, you do things. Um, Here's the interesting thing with Dad. He never inflicted or imposed on me his viewpoint of how things had to be or how they had to be done. And if I did something stupid, he wouldn't kind of beat me up over it. He wouldn't, rub my nose in it. He was always supportive, and he was always trying to show me a better way without preaching. And that's really who he was. And that was kind of special. So, we never had a struggle as a father-son kind of thing, even through teenage years.
Yeah,
He was always supportive. Um, one of and you'll recognize this, he was always, making sure that I was working towards something, a goal. And every day he'd ask me, what did you do today to get yourself a little bit closer to that? And that was how he focused, even as a teenager. Now, I'm here to tell you, you couldn't get away with anything. My father, he's very
yeah.
intuitive. And, if you pulled off a stupid stunt and you tried to fib to him, man, he knew it. And, the interesting thing was he didn't even have to say anything. It was just the way he looked at you and you knew you were seen. And that was a kind of not a bad thing. I always have, great memories around it. And for me, that I think the thing that warms my heart the most, David, when I think about my father throughout my entire life, but especially during those teenage years, was just the incredible support. He was constantly supporting and encouraging me to do and be better. And that was it. He didn't try to dictate what I had to do, where I had to go, how I had to do things. He was just an incredible support in growth. And that was it. And he let me find my own way. I'm not sure if you know, but when I was late teens, early 20s, I worked with him for a few years. And I was like a roadie. I'd be out there, slugging the blackboard, because this was time when there was no PowerPoint slides. He had a blackboard that he used. And I was just, setting up the room, doing all that kind of stuff. Well, then, I had to go out and find my own way. I had to see who's Brian? What can I do in this world? And in my mid-20s, I got into real estate. And I took and applied everything I learned from my father and put it into real estate. And my first year in the business, I actually made it at one point into the top 100 of a very large real estate firm internationally.
Wow.
My sales were right off the bat really good. And that was because I just applied everything I learned from Dad. And I really kind of found my own way. I got to find who I was and how, my own worth, I guess. And then for years, he kept trying to talk me into coming back to the company. And it was probably 12, 15 years later, I did. And I am so grateful I did. I got to work with him for close to 30 years
Yeah.
in total. And I was really, I was involved in the marketing and the affiliate world and all that kind of stuff with him. And it was a joy. I mean, it was just an absolute joy.
Oh, well, Insights for the Day was incredible. Like the what guys built there. I mean, because really, when you started doing that, there was nothing out there. I mean, it was just, I mean, I don't even, was that before Mike Dooley even started?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. And I think there's a great lesson in this, David. We talked about my father and what was he like. And
Yeah.
when I first started to work with him, I was in sales and I was selling seminars. And man, I'll be the first to tell you, I did not enjoy it. I wasn't having fun. And I remember sitting down with Dad and I said, Dad, this is not my thing. I don't like going into cities ahead of time, having to put on presentations and trying to fill a room. And it just wasn't me. And here was his response. He says, that's fine, Brian. He says, and don't do it. He said, just find another way that you can contribute. And that was it. There's no like, well, you just got to get out there and do that, or you got to get better at it, or any of that thing. He was always supportive. Just find your own way, what resonates with you. And that's when I came up with this whole Inside of the Day. And, I challenge anybody that's watching or listening to this. If you have an idea, you got to step into it and start doing it. Well, I had this idea for Inside of the Day, And what it was, this was back in like 99. This was before email list building was ever a thing. It was before quote of the day online was ever a thing.
Yeah.
I had these little books. You'll know from Chicago, the Bits and Pieces.
Yes.
These little miniature books. I've got several
Yep.
around.
Yep.
And Dad always had them laying around. And as a kid, I remember always reading them. I just really enjoyed them because all it was just filled with inspirational quotes and uplifting stories. And that's when I thought, gosh, in real estate, I was successful because I stayed in touch with my clients. I was always amazed at how few real estate agents, they sell somebody a house and then they never stay in touch with them again. And I always stayed in touch with my clients. And because of that, I got referrals all the time. And I was looking at the seminar business and I was thinking, we've got no great way that we're staying in touch with people. So I thought, why don't I start sending out just an inspirational quote Monday to Thursday? And every Friday, I'll send an uplifting story. And that's how it was kind of birthed. And I did it via email. I think we started out with 300 maybe emails, 150 to 300, somewhere in there. And it took a little while in the beginning, but it built itself into the database well over 1 million people that became the reason why one of the reasons why he was so successful, because we were able to reach out to a lot of people. And all it was just delivering value. But here's the thing. If I had known what was required to make that a success, David, I might not have ever done it because it was crazy. This was before, AWebers or MailChimps or all the systems that there are today. I had to physically do it from my own computer. And when I started doing more and more of it, my internet service provider, they'd shut me down thinking I was spamming, and I'd have to show them that no, people want to receive this. And so it was a constant evolution until it became what it is today. But yeah, it was really in the early days of email marketing and list building. And when The Secret came out, we were ready for it because we already had a system to capture email addresses and to send out value, where a lot of the other speakers didn't. And that really set us apart from a lot of the other people.
It sure did. And I knew several other speakers that were in The Secret and that weren't prepared. And they did not, I mean, your dad, let's see if I can remember, he used to have a saying like, when opportunity shows up, if you're not prepared, you'll only appear foolish or something. I don't exactly remember if that's 100% correct. But I thought to myself, oh, good for him when that came, that he was able to take advantage of that, because I heard horror stories from people that, like, some people's businesses just kind of collapsed because they did not have the ability to process the exposure that they were getting.
Right. And
that's, I mean, everything leads to something else, right? I mean, it's just one thing. You do the thing that's in front of you. You have no idea what the effect that it's going to have futuristically on what it is that you're doing. So here's my question. So what are you doing now? You wrote the book. What's next?
So yeah, I wrote the book, and it's been a journey, David. I never expected. I didn't really know what to expect. When you write something like this, you always question, is this good enough? And the response has been incredible.
It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal book.
It's really been great. And so I've been asked on all kinds of podcasts. I've done hundreds of interviews. I've started speaking, which I get up on stage and I think, my God, man, my father's got to be smiling from heaven, because he wanted me to speak so badly. It was just never my thing. But now that he's gone, I have found a way to deliver the message of who he was and what he was about in my own way. I didn't have to teach it his way. Yeah. And it's been a lot of fun. So for me, it's been big on the book promotion. I know that if somebody gets this book, they'll get value from it. And because it's sharing everything that he taught his own son. So that's a big part of what I'm doing now, is just getting the book out in the world. I'm doing some speaking now. I'm putting together a program that I'll be putting out online. So just really kind of not taking over or doing what my father did, but just doing something along that line that really will continue to share his legacy and his message with the world
Yeah.
in my own way.
In your
And
own way. Yeah, absolutely. In your
it's
own
been
way.
a great experience. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah, well, I'm going to encourage everybody to get the book. The other thing here is I love that Pritchett did the audio opening on that. Like, I love Price. He's absolutely fantastic. I gotta tell you, I did not know what you were doing. I assumed that you were with Proctor Gallagher, but I have no idea. I never met Sandy. I don't know Sandy. I don't know what happened, after your dad passed away, but I listen to your dad all the time. I think about him. Sometimes I swear he's answering me when I have a question. It's because sometimes I'll think to myself, I wonder what Proctor would say to me right now about this. And I hear his voice in my head. And it's like, what are you doing? Is that you? Anyway, I was thinking about him. I went through a little rough time with something, and I kept hearing your dad's voice. And then I was on YouTube, and all of a sudden I see you having this conversation on a podcast. And I'm like, what's this? So I'm listening to you, and then I find out you write a book. I immediately got the book and I downloaded it and I started listening to it. I'm like, oh, I gotta see if he'll do an interview. This is absolutely fantastic. But what's interesting about this was that there was something that you said in the book. You talked about the stack of books that he had on his desk for when he passed, the next place, right? So I've got a story that you might find fun. He said to me one day, because he would always tell me, David, get this book, get this book, get this book. Mm-hmm. So there was a time when I was working with facilitators when he first started the program, and I was trying to teach them how to sell. And I was coming up on the weekends, and I would see him and Linda. Sometimes I would have dinner at their house, and we were working out of what was it? It was in Markham, whatever the hotel was. Anyway, he says to me, get Robert Collier's book, The Secret of Secrets. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay. So, and this is before you could just, go to like Amazon and get books. Because I was going to Toronto, by the way, your dad, and like, he was a race car driver. He used to pick me up with Mercedes. I was like, holy cow. Anyway, there's this little old used bookshop. I don't know if it's still there, but it was in Milwaukee's airport, General Mitchell Airport. And I would go and I would walk around in there, and I came across this. It was used, and it came as a collection. It was The Secret of the Ages by Robert Collier and J. Paul Getty's book, The Golden Age. So I picked this, I got that. And that was one of the first things that, like, he told me to get it, and all of a sudden there it was. So then he says to me, this is a long time ago. He said, you've got a faith problem. And I didn't know what he meant by that. He said, I want you to get a book. It's called God Works Through Faith by Robert Russell. So I looked and looked for this book. I couldn't find it. It was out of print. They weren't doing reprints online at that time. I'm looking, not finding this book anywhere. So your dad would tell a story about when he first started to get into Robert Russell's work. And he said he had a set of Russell's books in the trunk of his car. And there was some guy that he met in business or in a seminar or whatever that was going through a bad time, and your dad gave him the whole set. He hadn't even gotten through the whole set yet. He just gave him the whole set, which was an incredible thing. There were some books and manuscripts that your dad gave me. A couple things he loaned to me, a couple things he had Gina like copy them and send them to me. But he had unique ways of making marks in these books. Okay. So one night, I sit up in the middle of the night, and in my mind, I hear God Works Through Faith. And I get up and I go to the computer, and I went to, I think it was Alabry at the time, and I punched it in, and there was this copy. It was a signed copy, and it was like $250 for this book. I've never spent $250. I'm like, get the book. I order the book. It comes. And I'm looking at this book and I see the same marks your dad used to put in these books. So I phoned him. And when I saw him the next time, I brought him the book and he goes, "That's the book that I gave away."
Wow.
You've got to be kidding me. He's like, "No, that's the exact book that I gave away."
Now that's a
And
cool story.
it's an awesome story. So I cherish that. It's like that book and a couple others. Also, Working with the Law by Raymond Hollywell, which he told me to get, which was life changing. Also,
Yep.
So there's always been this thing. Like he would say to me, he would do that thing where I think you wrote about this in your book too. Like open up a page in the book. Like he would do that thing. Like if you have a question, you can answer and open up the page in the book.
Yep.
I've always followed that. So I wanted to share that story with you because it just meant so much to me, and how much I can't imagine how many people your dad made a mark on in their life that are actually passing those lessons on to other people around the world. It's got to be an astronomical number.
It's got to be. It's got to be. I think he just touched so many lives. I think one of the things that really touched me the most, David, was after he passed away, we did an online memorial, and
I watched.
There was a few 100,000 people that were watching it live. It was astounding to me, and all of the comments. It took me days to read the comments, and it was just heartwarming. It was. I don't think Dad even had any idea of how far his reach was. The comments were from people all around the world and what he meant to them and how he changed their life in one way or the other through his teachings. And boy, it was just, I take comfort from that because he really did make a difference. He really did. I mean, that was his mission, was to make a difference.
Yeah, and Mary did a wonderful job with that, by the way.
She did, didn't she? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Mary
really
Morrissey, she's been a gift. She was a gift to me when Dad passed. Without going into the deep stories, my father came home so that he could pass away at home surrounded by his family. He wanted to see all his grandkids and everybody. So we were able to get him home, and he was home for 2 or 3 days before he passed away. And Mary Morrissey flew up, and she was one of the ones that was there, to say goodbye to him. And she was a gift for all of us through that time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a special relationship. He knew her for a long, long time, right?
Yeah, they really did. They were great friends, really
Yeah.
great. And they helped each other. It was, here's the thing I think with my father more than anything. You talk about the books, and you can imagine my father, birthdays or Christmas. He's a tough guy to buy for.
I can imagine.
Yeah, anything he ever wanted, he just went out and got. I mean, that's just who he was. And I always had fun finding really unique old original edition books, books that he really liked to study. And boy, some of them cost a few $1,000s. I mean, they were expensive to get, first edition, sometimes signed, but in really good shape of some of these books that he studied, because many of them were written in the early 1900s. There was a couple, I believe, even in the late 1800s. But here's the interesting thing about Dad. He loved to study. He loved to study. And he always said that no matter where you are in life, if you just study just a little bit every day, your life will get better. And he said, that the biggest problem most of us have when we're setting goals or deciding what we want in our life is we let our current circumstance dictate the way we think and what we're capable of. And he said, we got to get away from that. We need to study more, not let our current circumstance, not let our current environment dictate what we want in life and what we're going to chase. And he says, if we can break free of that and go after something big, that's when we live. And that's when we achieve great things. And for him, he learned all of that through study, through books. And that's one of the greatest lessons that he passed down to me. And you talked earlier about just doing little things each day. That was Dad's deal. He said, so often everybody's looking for that one big event, that one big thing that's going to change their life. If all we did was focus today on what one little thing can I do today that's going to just get me a step closer to my dream? If we did that every single day, those little things will add up over a period of time. Before long, we've achieved that big thing and we didn't even know how we got there. And that's how we do things in life. Dad, right up until virtually the day before he passed, he was always, what did you do today, Brian? What did you do today that got you one step closer to your goal? That was it. That was his question. And he always had me focused on the present moment. If we could be the best version of us every single day, be that best version of us, what would our life be like? If we were the best version of us with our wife or our husband or our kids or our parents, what would life be like? In a business, if we were the best version of us every day and we lived in the present moment and did what we could right now, our life would be different. And
Yeah, for
it was my
sure.
father that taught me all of that. And it's a special way to live, and it is a way to achieve great things in life.
Did he ever talk to you about what it was like when he first started studying, before he was really even applying it to anything? I know he had the breakthrough when he was cleaning floors, and that kind of woke him up. I had the same type of thing, but what was it like for him when he first started studying? Was it hard? I mean, here's something that amazed me about him. There was this loving, caring, giving person, and I watched it over and over and over again. And I thought to myself, where did he get that from? Was that something that he developed in himself? Did that come from his mom? Like, because you don't, I mean, I know a lot of people that are in this industry and you don't see that. Okay. I mean, but it was so genuine with him.
Right. He got it from his mother.
He got it from his mother.
We called her Nan, my grandmother. He really got that from his mother. His mom was, oh my God, she was a special lady. I look at my Aunt Helen now, my dad's sister, and my Aunt Helen is, I swear I'm looking at my Nan when I see her and when I talk to her, because she has that same way about her. But Nan taught Dad about giving and what it means to give and to help people around you. That's really where he got that from. The spark of being more and doing more, yes, he got from books. Ray Stanford was really his first mentor. He's the one that gave Dad Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And that book altered the course of my father's life. It was the first book he ever really read. And it set a spark in my father. It resonated with him. Now, whether it's Think and Grow Rich or Working with the Law or, The Secret, whatever, books can change your life if you take the material and apply it in the real world. And my father was a master at applying what he was learning. And that's really where it all came from. But so his drive came from books. His way of caring, it came from his mother. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I had a feeling. And with the beautiful way that you referred to her in that relationship with her, I mean, I knew that he used to do things with her, but I didn't know any of the stuff that you wrote in the book. And it was so heartfelt, those stories about with his mom and with you kids and, her down in Florida and all of that. And that he didn't refer to his dad as much, because he had a rough time after the war and everything. So I always find it's interesting, like if you can, whatever it is that you know about a person, what is it that sticks with an individual? And that's something that obviously stuck. I've never met another person as generous as your dad.
No, that's I mean, my God, right till the day of his passing almost, he was without a doubt the most generous human being I have ever met. And I realized I'm biased. But boy, he would do anything for anybody if they asked. He was forever giving money to different charities, to different people that needed things, doing things, speaking for people without charging. So if it would help
Yeah.
their cause, I mean, he did so much out in the world. It was truly incredible. And
Yes.
that's one of the great things, David. I think I certainly saw when we did that online memorial, some of the messages coming in about what he did for some of these different people that even family we didn't know. I mean, that was just who he was. And that's a gift.
And he talked about it as part of your own development to become successful, right? He's like, you can't outgive God.
That's right.
And it was just give, 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 give. And Like there were times in the beginning where I'm like, Bob, I don't know if I can come this weekend because I don't have enough money. And he'd be like, what? He's like, you're not giving enough. Go find somebody to help. That's what he would tell me. And then he would hang up the phone. But I learned to do that, and it made all the difference in the world. I mean, I practice it every day, absolutely every day. And I give all the credit to him because he was very much a father figure for me at that point in my life, and very insistent. And I respected him like you would not believe. So if he told me to do something, it was like, I'm going to actually do this. But I did it long enough that I could see that it worked. Like you couldn't deny the impact that it would have. Like I would give, and then the sales would increase.
Right.
Opportunities would show up, you know, and he would, he would laugh, or he would say, see, I told you.
Yeah, he was such a firm believer that you need to give, givers gain. He said,
Like Bob Berg.
Yeah, and I'll tell you an interesting little story. So it was always rumored that the title character in Bob Berg's book, Pindar, was based after my father. And I was on a podcast, I don't know, 4 months ago, 5 months ago with somebody, and I was talking about that. And this fellow said, well, I know Bob Berg. So he reached out to Bob Berg and asked him. And we have verification that Pindar was based on my father. And that was a fun thing to see. But that's who Dad was. He was always, you could never give enough. And he says, if you want to receive, you need to help more people. He says, if you can help more people find their way and achieve what their dreams are, you will achieve all of your dreams. And boy, he lived that. He really did. And one of the other things that I really learned from him that I think relates to this, if you don't mind me sharing,
I don't mind
is
at all.
we had a thing, Dad and I, and this makes me think of you actually. When I first saw your message when you wrote in, and I said, oh my God, David Neagle. I said, oh, I haven't talked to him in so long. And as soon as I saw your name, it took me back, and I remember my father always spoke so highly of you, and he really did enjoy you. And I mean, you can tell by the stories you're telling. And Dad and I had a habit, something that we did. We were forever on the phone at between 5 and 6 a.m. almost every day. He was always an early riser. I was always an early riser. He'd get up, and he knew I'd be up. So he'd reach out, hey, you up? You want to talk? and we'd get on the phone and we'd start chatting. And this is something we did. We would talk good about people behind their back. Dad always said that you can tell the character of a person by how they talk about somebody else behind their back. And he got me in the habit of speaking good about people behind their back, rather than getting involved in gossip and nonsense. What's good about somebody, and really sharing that. And I'll tell you what it does. It raises your energy. It puts you into a different state when you can start even consciously speaking good about people behind their back when they don't even know. What you put out into this world is it really, we do attract what we see. And if we look for the good, we are going to attract more good. And we need to live that way. Dad lived that way. He taught that to me right from when I was a little boy. And it was a pretty special thing.
That's really something special to grow up with, to have somebody that teaches you that. I did not grow up in that environment. I had to learn how to do that. But and you mentioned this a couple of times too. He really was an early riser, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, he totally was. Yeah.
Was he a big sleeper? Did he sleep? Was he one of those guys that could like make it on 3 hours of sleep a night type thing? Or
he could, but he needed his sleep. He was not a night owl, and I'm not. My wife and I, you'll catch us in bed sometimes at 8:30 at night. Quite often. We're early to bed, early to rise. Dad was the same way. And it's funny, my daughter is the same way. I see it in her too.
Yeah.
So I think it was just part of our makeup.
Now you're living where? Washington now?
I am in Washington State. We are in Olympia, right on the south part of Puget Sound.
It is so gorgeous there.
Oh my God, it's beautiful here. Beautiful here.
Because you were in Florida, right? How did you end up in
so I moved from
Puget Sound?
Toronto to Florida because I was kind of done with the Toronto winter thing, and Corey and I got together a number of years ago, and Corey is from the Northwest. She was actually living in Alaska, and I was living in Florida. So we were about as far apart as we could possibly get on the North American continent. And we lived a good chunk of the time in Florida, and Florida was just not Corey's thing. And that's okay. I get it. And we were visiting her parents, who live here in Olympia. And man, we went for a walk, and I'm looking out over the water and the trees and the mountains. And it's like, I said to her, I said, I could live here. And that was kind of it. I started looking for places, and she loved this area. I love this area. So it was an area that we would both be happy in. And so we found this property, and we bought it. And, it's in the book. We tore the house down and built a brand new house, and we're right on the water. We've had orcas 100 feet from our deck. Wow. Last summer, I had a seal give birth to a little pup right in front of me. I mean, it's magnificent here. So we're living in a great place. And I will say that it was my father that encouraged me to go after this, because
Really?
it was a big deal. It cost us a lot of money that at that time we didn't have, and I was looking for ways to earn extra income and do different things. And Dad was my biggest cheerleader. He was so supportive, and he said, "What'd you do today? What'd you do, to get yourself one step closer into that home?" And we did it, and we're living here, and we're loving it.
That's fantastic. What a great story. Where in Alaska did she live?
She lived in Sitka, Alaska, which is the southeast or
Wow.
southeast. Yeah.
There's only two states that I haven't been to, Alaska and Maine. So Alaska I have on the list. I definitely have to get there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And where she lived was absolutely beautiful. And I mean, I loved it there, but I did not love the weather. It was just I just couldn't do the weather there.
Yeah.
So we found our happy middle ground. This is a great place. We have moderate winters, which is perfect, beautiful summers, and nature. I'm big.
That's
I'm
fantastic. Yeah,
That's
your
good.
dad loved nature too, didn't he?
Oh, he did. He did. Toronto, Toronto in the wintertime is just not
Yeah,
that
oh yeah.
great. But in the summertime, I mean, Dad's backyard, we would sit in that backyard for hours. He would just look around, and he would just be grateful for everything. And he was feeding every little critter that was around there. I mean, I don't know how many bags of seed and everything else they buy for birds and squirrels and all that kind of stuff. But he just loved being outside and just watching what was going on.
What a wonderful man. Well, Brian, thank you for doing this. It's been like a walk down memory lane, and you've got so much knowledge about what he taught you and the way that you were raised. I mean, what a remarkable experience to share that with everybody. So thank you so much for doing that. It's seriously going to bless people's lives. It's blessed my life. I mean, I've listened to it 3 times back to back because first of all, who taught me how to study? Your father taught me how to study. You're like, don't get off the sentence until you understand it. So yeah, it's wonderful. So I'm really grateful that you did this, and let's stay in touch.
I will. Thank you, David. I really appreciate you having me on, and appreciate you getting the word out about the book. That's
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll put a link in it and everything for people to get it. So anything that I can do to help you, you bet.
Well, it's been great seeing you again, and really, really good talking with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.